Hi friends, welcome back or welcome if you are new. My name is Mali and today we're going to do my March reading wrap up. And I think we're going to jump straight into it because I have quite a lot of books to go through with you guys. But before we do, let's have a little sip of my coffee. So good. I'm giving you a little sneak peek of what we're working with today. So yeah, we have 11 books to talk about, 2 DNFs. So we are just going to jump straight into it. So the very first book that I read in March was The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This follows a fragmented, sort of like push and pull type of relationship between a mother and her daughter who live in a very small house in the woods. Oh, and did I mention that they're cannibals? They live off strays, as they call them. They're lost hikers or campers who stumble upon the house. They gorge themselves on fingers and other body parts, and they do this for years, isolated from the rest of the world. This is told from young Margot's point of view, making it a very dark coming of age, and it uses cannibalism to explore this very strange mother-daughter dynamic and the dark side of love. This also had the added exploration of Margot's desire. She desired her mother's love and affection, almost competing for it, and she also desired this young girl, her classmate. I particularly really liked the atmosphere in this book. It had a really grotesque, kind of like claustrophobic and grimy feel to it. I mean, we literally get scenes of Margot eating black mold, which was somehow even nastier for me to read than the very graphic scenes of the women preparing human flesh to cook and then eat. All in all, I thought this was a very fun read. Like I said, I love a cannibalism book as a metaphor for love. Yet I found that a lot of this was quite repetitive for me. I wanted a bit more from this, but all in all, I did enjoy my time with it. Had a blast reading this with some friends and discussing and making theories. While a little bit repetitive, it was quite fun, and I thought it was a very solid debut from Lucy Rose. I will definitely read whatever else she puts out. I then finished Death Takes Me by Cristina Rivera Garza. This was a lot of work to get through, and I'm not 100% sure that it was worth it. On the surface, this reads as a detective noir surrounding the brutal murders and castrations of men popping up in the area. The first man is found by our protagonist with the same name as the author. This fictional Cristina Rivera Garza is a professor, and she's quite familiar with Alejandra Pizarnik's poetry, which turns out to be quite useful in this case because Pizarnik's prose is then found on every murder site. And this is how the professor turned suspect turned informant comes into contact with the detective. She's a woman who leads the investigation of the castrated men, and she has quite a lot to prove. Quick update, I turned on my lamp because I think it's getting quite gloomy. I think it's gonna be like a spring shower. I don't want this video to be so gray, so I turned on my little lamp. Proceeding on, this book doesn't go the conventional path of a thrilling detective novel, and in fact that whole aspect takes sort of like a backstage role for like the majority of the book. It's all a pretense because then the novel shifts into being quite an intense conversation on Pizarnik, her work, her life, and even her death. For me, unfortunately, this didn't quite work for me. There were entire chapters written in prose, footnotes, making this a very big like literary labyrinth in order to find a connection between the murders and poetry. Basically, Death Takes Me is just a love letter of sorts to Alejandra Pizarnik's work and her legacy. I wish I was more familiar with Pizarnik's work. I had a brief stint with her in university. I had a literary class and we were doing some readings on her. In fact, I would so love to talk about this novel with that professor that I had. She was so passionate about literature. I think she would really like this. And I remember her really liking Pizarnik as well. So I think it would have been so cool if I could talk with my professor about this book. Maybe she would have given me some insight. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'm just not the audience for this book. I'm not huge on prose poetry, and I found a lot of the narrative very convoluted and confusing because of it. There were so many times when I was really just lost lost and I didn't know which of the characters were speaking. I did enjoy some of this. I can't say that I didn't. I did like reading about detectives, but again, I only enjoyed those brief respites where the novel will follow a typical detective storyline. So grateful that I did get to read Cassandra Vergara's newest release. This is a art copy that Bogart Books sent to me. So thank you guys so much for sending this over. I am so sorry that I could not give you a glowing positive review, but again, it's just very experimental, very not my thing really, but I am so very grateful that you guys sent it over for me anyways. Thanks to the Booker Prize, I picked up Orbital by Samantha Harvey, and I thought that this was the most boring winner of the prize in a while. In this, we follow a group of 6 astronauts, all from different countries. We get people from Russia, Italy, Japan, America, and this should have been a more interesting character study, as all of these people from different places with different cultures, different ways of thinking, as they learn to navigate a confined space together and live around each other for months at a time like this in such cramped corners. But instead, Harvey makes planet Earth the main character. That's where it lost me. So this reads as sort of like a love letter to Earth, but sadly it's a very uninspired letter. Harvey goes on to describe Earth and how it looks from above, the many places that the astronauts can see. Orbital is more of a geography textbook than a novella. And I say this because it goes on and on and on about all the places, all the countries, all the cities, all the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, the oceans that the fucking astronauts can see. And I swear to God that it goes on like that for pages and pages and pages. It's so boring. Like, we get it. They can see the fucking Pacific Ocean. We get it. They can see 1,000 sunsets and sunrises in the course of one day. We get it. I don't need to read about it. We did get a little bit of backstory on the characters, their moon mission, and their day-to-day living in a space shuttle, but it wasn't enough for me. When Harvey wasn't listing countries, she was waxing poetic about how small humans are against the backdrop of space. Very boring, unfortunately, so that was Orbital. My next sci-fi read went a lot better though. This is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, and I think it's best to dive into this one knowing absolutely nothing like I did. But I will say though that there's time travel involved, there's people living in colonies in the moon, multiple pandemic outbreaks, and this is all connected to this one strange phenomenon that spans centuries. This was a very sprawling, cinematic, and captivating read about mortality, time, and life. I absolutely loved it. The balance between the plot, which was fast and addictive, and the characters, who were plentiful, yet we get to know them just enough in order to care about them and actually remember them. Like, you were never bombarded by so many characters. I thought that was done a very nice way, like a very balanced way. Made me realize that I do like a book with a little bit of plot sometimes and not just a meandering style of consciousness type of thing. The narrative is split between 3 very vast time periods. You have 1912, 2020, the year 2203. And at first, these very different centuries made the book feel a little bit like a short story collection, but they came together and interconnected in such clever ways that I could only gape at the book in shock. My only gripe with this is that honestly, I wish I had more of this. I wish I had more pages of this. Could have easily read like another 200 pages. And I think if we did have a couple more pages, a certain character would have felt a little bit more fleshed out for me. The ending would have hit a lot more emotionally. But besides that, I had such a blast. Like, truly so much fun reading this book, and I found myself thinking about it quite fondly in the past couple of weeks. So I gave it a 4-star, but it could end up on my end of year list. Good Girl by Aria Aber. This is the first book that I read for my Reading the Women's Prize long list video, and I had such a good time with this one. This is a coming of age which at surface level seems to be just about another naive party girl getting herself involved with dangerous drugs and dangerous men, but it is so much more than that. It's an incredible layered story on identity, shame, and even grief. I really adored Nila. She's our protagonist and narrator. She's Afghan, she's 19, and she carries a lot of shame about being Afghan. I really loved her character and coming to understand where the shame comes from. I love the juxtaposition we got between her partying in the hottest clubs in Berlin while also getting chapters on her childhood, growing up poor, and the shame that comes from that, and her witnessing her parents struggle as immigrants in a city where it's quite hostile to be an immigrant. There was a lot of nuance and layers to Nila, and I so enjoyed like peeling back those layers. I found this so readable, and I've read this one almost compulsively. Aber's prose is so enjoyable, which makes a lot of sense because she's actually a poet, and I love when poets then write a novel because they're the most beautiful things that you will ever read. That was Good Girl. Again, I really highly recommend. It was a very strong contender on the long list. I'm very, very happy that it's getting its due praise. And this is actually an art copy again from Hogarth Books. So thank you so much, Hogarth, for sending this over. Then we have a short little book. This is A Spy in the House of Love by Anais Nin. This had the pleasure of being my very first Anais Nin. And while I didn't love this, I didn't hate this. And I'm very keen on reading another Anais Nin sometime in the future. In this, we follow Sabrina. She's a young, beautiful woman in the 1950s, and she is in the habit of pursuing sex in a very carefree and casual manner, which for a woman in the 50s, that type of sexual freedom is quite unheard of. The plot then goes on to follow Sabrina and her many sexual adventures with various men in the city. I like the writing. There was some very gorgeous quotes in here, and I liked being in Sabrina's head and following her inner conflict with her own lifestyle. She was constantly lying to the men that she will meet, to herself, and even to her husband. Sabrina was in a constant search for who she was. It's funny because she would lie to everyone about being an actress in order to keep up with her lifestyle, yet she felt like one every time she had to put on a persona for a particular man. So she will constantly be changing her character, her personality to shape the men she was with. That being said, I did have my gripes with this. I didn't really like the abrupt way it would go from one scene to the next. It made for a very fragmented feel to the reading experience that I didn't really like. And at the end of the day, it was a little bit too meandering for me. I would have liked to see more from the lie detector, who is a character that Sabrina calls one night in order to confess about her lifestyle and her lies. While not a crime, she does feel a lot of guilt about her lifestyle. The lie detector begins to observe her, but this only happens in like the first part and then towards the end. I thought Anais Nin exploration of a world where a woman could explore sex in the same way a man does to be really interesting. She never paints what Sabrina does in a bad light. She never judges her for it. It's definitely more of an inner conflict that Anais Nin explores in A Spy in the House of Love. The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami reads like a dark mirror episode. It's a lyric dystopia that explores the dark side of tech and algorithms. Sarah, our protagonist, is stopped at the airport. Her risk score is too high, and officials have determined that due to her recent dream data, dreams in which she harms her husband, she's a would-be criminal. Sarah is then sent to a retention center where she is to be observed and eventually deemed safe enough to return to her husband and ultimately society. She's only supposed to be there for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks at most, but her stay lasts up to a couple of months. And that's because she keeps getting strikes on her record. But how is she supposed to keep a clean record when the rules change every day? Rules that are designed to keep her there indefinitely. This book really felt of our times despite that dystopian aspect. The retention center in here reminded me so much of the immigration system and how that system is made to keep people locked up there indefinitely in order to make profit of them. The aspect of algorithms and constant surveillance also seem so close to our reality. The Dream Hotel is a world where every action of ours is reflected on a risk score. I do have to admit that this book is a little bit slow in its pacing, but I do not mind that at all. In this case, I was so invested in Sarah's predicament and her fight for her freedom that slow build actually made a lot of tension and intrigue for me. If you love literary dystopian books, I so recommend this. After, I picked up Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell, and same as The Dream Hotel, this is yet another book that I read for the Women's Prize for Fiction. At this point, I was quite deep on that list and really making my way through the 16 books. I didn't read all 16 books. You guys can see which ones I read in this vlog. In this one, we follow Ciara. She's a young mother who, in the middle of the day, packs up her things and her children and drives away from the life that she shares with her husband, Ryan. This is a book on domestic violence and the many different shapes it takes. Ciara struggles with the reality of her situation because on the outside, Ryan's actually a pretty stand-up guy. He's really good to her kids as well, and they have shared so many good moments together. So yes, while he does have a temper that seems to come out of nowhere, isn't it at the end of the day her fault? Because at the end of the day, he never has hit her. So is it truly that bad? Those are just some of the questions that Ciara asks herself. I read the measure of this book with my heart in my throat. I was so rooting for Ciara and her children to be okay and to have a peaceful, quiet home. This is powerful, raw, unflinching, yet also tender as you see the girls, despite it all, find community amidst all the chaos. Nesting was quite an emotional read about motherhood and survival. I then picked up A Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez, and I was really excited to do so because you guys know that I love Mariana Enriquez. I got into her at the end of 2024 and I really enjoy her writing, and her way of doing horror is just absolutely just chef's kiss. This is composed of 12 short stories. This collection explores the uncanny, the supernatural, and the everyday violence that humans are capable of. This collection was such a treat for me, and I think everything just worked. Mariana Enriquez definitely knows how to make a short story, and I mean that with as much shade as possible. Every story here had like a beginning, a conflict, and an ending. Some of my favorites from the collection were My Sad Death, which is set in a neighborhood that's ransacked by kidnapping, shootings, and ghosts. The titular story, A Sunny Place for Shady People, was a little true crime piece that also touches on the subject of addiction. Another standout for me was Julie. This is about a girl who likes being railed by ghosts so much that it becomes a concern health-wise for her family. Yes, I did say that sentence out loud. Yes. Anyways, moving on. Other stories that I enjoyed were Nightbirds, The Refrigerator Cemetery, A Local Artist, and Black Eyes. And that last one, Black Eyes, oh my god. Just thinking about it gives me chills. That one truly terrified me. There's just something about children, evil children, that just makes my blood run cold. Yeah, a very spectacular short story collection. Thank you so much, Hogarth Books, for sending this over. See what I mean, that they treat me so well. After that, I picked up a nonfiction. This is Rivermouth by Alejandra Olivia. And I don't remember the last time I picked up a nonfiction or memoir. I've truly been in like a fiction bubble for the past couple of months, really. This follows Alejandra Olivia's experience translating at the US-Mexico border. She recounts the people she meets coming into the USA border, seeking asylum, translating their traumas, and feeding it to the messed up immigration system. Olivia is Mexican American herself. She talks about her childhood growing up in between two cultures and feeling split between two vastly different countries. I really enjoy the conversation around translating in this book, the constant struggle that Olivia had with translating migrants' complex stories into a singular form so that the immigration system could only judge that person to that very limited view, a view that was without nuance, without compassion or empathy, a view that more often than not harmed migrants seeking safety. This was clearly a very personal view into a system that harms and condemns humans seeking asylum in the USA, whether they cross the right way or the wrong way. Finally, the very last book that I read in March was Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan. This was actually a reread for me. I read this for the very first time back in 2022, and I remember that I enjoyed it. I just didn't remember why I enjoyed it, and so I was really curious to reread it and see if I will feel differently about it. I didn't know if I was gonna hate it or love it even more this next time around, and I'm very happy to say that I loved it so much more the second time around. I had forgotten what I liked so much about it that very first time I read it, but it came to me so quickly, almost as a slap to the face, and it was definitely the writing. You guys can see I have so many dog ears. Like, this book is fat with dog ears. I so love a literary fiction that serves as a deep dive into a singular character, innermost private thoughts, desires, and habits in such a way that they feel real to me, and that's exactly what we got in here. We get to know our character as she recounts her time with Ciaran, who is a boy that she meets at a club, and from then on the two start a romance that very quickly veers into the obsessive and toxic. From the many dog years, you guys can see that I just love the writing. I love my experience going back into this and really absorbing it and just really enjoying the reading experience. It was so incredibly raw and vulnerable. I was constantly floored by like a particular passage or quote. I love the parts where our narrator will sort of reflect on the actions of her younger self now that she was a lot older and removed from that experience. Her being understanding with herself and having compassion for herself was really a little bit refreshing, because at the end of the day, that was still her. Acts of Desperation is an intoxicating tale on unrequited love, obsession, sex, and I loved each and every single page of this. Very quickly before we end the video, I do want to very briefly mention the two DNFs that I had. So I DNF Lights by Olga Tokarczuk, and I also DNF The Ministry of Time. I won't go into detail because I have both of these experiences documented. I DNF Flights on my first episode of Read It or Unhauled vlog, and I also DNF The Ministry of Time in my Reading the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist vlog. So I think on here I'm just gonna say that both of these books just did not work for me. I can't be reading books that I don't like just for a video. So we would DNF and we move on. So that is the end of this video. Those are all the books that I read and DNF'd in the month of March. I had such a good month. Like I said, I'm just in awe at how such a good month it was, like reading wise and also life wise. I had such a good time with friends. I've been loving the weather lately and like going outside to read and read by the beach or the pool. So I feel like I had a lot of that this month, which made me really happy. I'm very curious to know how your month of reading went. Did you have any standout reads for you? Did you read any books that I read in this video, and how did you think about them? I think my favorites from this month were definitely Acts of Desperation, and I also really enjoyed Sea of Tranquility. Good Girls also a really honorable mention. I will let you guys go here. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you very soon in a new video. Bye.